If you have your Bibles, turn with me to the book of Genesis chapter 5. I mentioned this character in a sermon a couple of weeks ago, briefly mentioned him. Heard a sermon on him today. We're going to talk about Enoch in the book of Genesis chapter 5. And we'll begin at verse 19 or 18. And Jared lived 162 years and begat Enoch. So here we have a man that was 162 when he had Enoch. That's a pretty old guy, isn't it? To start with. And all the days of Jared were and Jared lived after he begat Enoch 800 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 65 years and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Now, verse 22 says that Enoch, after he begat Methuselah, walked with God 300 years. I made a statement last time I mentioned this guy. If we went 300 days and walked with God, that would be something, wouldn't it? How are we going to walk with God in that way? Does Enoch have a different God? Did Enoch have something that we don't? Does Enoch know something that we don't? Now, if you think about it, Enoch may have known less because Jesus had not come. The scriptures were not written. As a matter of fact, even the Mosaic law had not been written. But do you think God can communicate things that he needed to know? And think about this. Before Peter arrived to Cornelius, Cornelius was a man that fasted, he prayed, he gave alms. He had all the marks of being a child of God before Peter ever arrived. And do you think God heard the prayers of Cornelius? Do you think he heard the prayers of Enoch? Now, I'm going to submit to you, I think if he walked with God 300 years, there was a lot of time he spent praying and meditating. How much of an effect do you think that had on Enoch? Just Enoch. Verse 24 says, And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Now that is an impressive thing. Now let me state one thing. Enoch was a blessed man, but he was for sure a sinner. But he was a blessed sinner, wasn't he? One that tried to do a lot of things that would be good for us to try to do ourselves. Now let's take a look and see what it says about him in the book of Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 11 is noted as, some call it the Faith Hall of Fame or the Roll Call of Faithful People, whatever you want to call it. Either way, it's God's inspired word about some people that lived in a very different way. In verse 5, by faith, in this Hebrews chapter 11, by the way, in verse 5, by faith Enoch was translated, that he should not see death, and was not found, Why wasn't he found? He has already experienced something that you hope to experience one day. He's already in his glorified state. His body and soul and spirit is in the presence of the Lord now. Now, I will submit to you, when you die, as Brother Brownie did this week, his soul is where Jesus Christ is. It's not soul sleep. He is where the Lord is and singing the new song, that thou art worthy. Just as Lazarus was when he was in Abraham's bosom, as Jesus Christ relayed the word of Lazarus than the rich man that was in torment. Abraham was not necessarily asleep. He was in Abraham's bosom, by the way. Interesting place, isn't it? So now it says that Enoch was translated, they should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him. Before his translation, he had this testimony, that he pleased God. So in our text, it says that he walked with God, and now we have it saying that he pleased God. That's a key to in and of itself, isn't it? If you're going to walk with God, there's a good chance you're going to please him along the way. Because if you draw nigh to God, he will what? Draw nigh to you. But when the other part of that verse is, resist the devil, and he'll flee from you. So we have a much better opportunity to please God as long as we're drawing nigh to him and resisting the devil. Not going to see how close we can get to the devil without getting our arm bit off. You know, anybody that's ever tried that? Let me rephrase that. Have you ever tried that? Because, my friends, the devil can devour in a hurry. So let's read. Now, here's the thing, though. It says that he pleased God. The next verse gives us a little more insight to Enoch's walk. It said that he pleased God, but it says, but without faith it is impossible to please him. Well, what is faith? Faith is a fruit of the Spirit. So one thing is, Enoch has got to be born again before any of this will work at all. Life must precede action. I want to ask you the question. God made man, Adam, out of the dust of the earth, right? Did he offer that dust a chance to come to life? Did he talk to it and say, come on, Adam, get up. I made you, now let's go. You say that's absolutely ridiculous. Well, trying to say that a dead alien sinner is going to do the same thing is absolutely ridiculous as well. But faith is a gift of God. And he's dealt to every man the measure of faith. So Enoch had the right amount. Now, my friends, all of us have the right amount of faith. The reason I know we have the right amount of faith is because Jesus Christ said that he measured it. Now, does Jesus Christ mismeasure anything? And I want to ask you all a question. Is there a difference in a teaspoon of salt and a tablespoon of salt? Think about it. I like to put salt in my tomato. Not a lot of people do. Now, if you salt a tomato with a salt shaker, you'll get about the right amount. But if you get one of them big old boxes of salt and pour it on, you're going to get too much, aren't you? Well, man can do that. But when Jesus Christ measures it, he puts exactly the right amount. So Jesus Christ has gave us the right amount of faith. The question is, what are we going to do with it? Because listen to this. Listen to what it says. But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is. It's kind of an interesting statement. There's a comma there. There's nothing else there. It says, must believe that he is. What do we must believe God is? What is God? He's God. In a more broad, that's a broad statement. He's omnipotent, omniscient, everywhere present, nowhere absent. He doesn't change. He knows what you're thinking. He knows what you're thinking right now. You imagine that. He knows he said the very hairs of our head are numbered. What did Solomon say about this, though? He said that, let's hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments. Well, folks, fearing God and believing that He is a very similar statement. Do you have a reverential, awed respect for the great God that you serve? And does it show that you believe that He is? Those things go together. They're almost inseparable. They go together so well. That you must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. Did Enoch diligently seek God? 300 years it says that he walked with Him. How are you going to walk with Him without seeking Him? It's those two verses are together for a reason. Now, think about the time frame in which Enoch lived. Does anybody know what Enoch's time frame was? Let's read on in our text in Genesis chapter 5. Now, Enoch has had Methuselah. Now, he lived 365 years, he did, and walked with God 300. Do you think there's any knowledge that he could have passed down to Methuselah about his walk with God? And Methuselah lived 187 years and begot Lamech. And Methuselah lived after he begot Lamech 782 years and begot sons and daughters. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. So Methuselah lived a long time too, didn't he? 969 years. That's a long time to live too, isn't it? To give y'all an indication on that, the United States has only been a nation a little above 200. And Lamech lived 182 years and begot a son. How many of you, without reading on, knows who the son is of Lamech? And he called his name Noah. Anybody who know who Noah was? Anybody know what Noah did? He built an ark. And Lamech lived after he begot Noah. Let's back up and he called his name Noah, saying, the same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because the ground which the Lord had cursed. Why did the Lord curse the earth? Sin. Originally Adam, but it has become worse, hasn't it? Because we remember why Noah built an ark. And Lamech, let's read. And Lamech lived after he begot Noah 595 years and begot sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So we are only 3 generations, though, removed from Enoch. Enoch is the great-grandfather of Noah. Now I'm going to ask a question. I want to point out this one for Elder Ricky, because I know who his great-grandfather was. Did you ever have any good knowledge passed down from Pappy Young to you? Did it have an effect? Does it have an effect? Now, you kids, be thankful y'all with Brother Ronnie, because he's got a lot of wisdom as well. Pass these things on to other generations. Do you think Noah had something from Enoch? Some knowledge from Enoch? Could the older Enoch teach the younger, and then those teach the younger again, till you have Noah? Now I'm going to ask you a question. How easy was it for that to happen? You think that's just a breeze thing to do? Listen to these statements. Chapter 6. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God, that's an interesting statement too, isn't it? We're talking about God's people had an issue with this, didn't they? The sons of God, who would that be? That would be God's people, the ones He chose before the foundation of the world, right? So the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. That's the first star of trouble too. Man's supposed to be clave to one wife, right? And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And here is the statement of what God saw in the days of Noah. Only 3 generations away from Enoch. Remember that. And God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of his thoughts heart was only evil continually. That's what God saw. It's a rotten set, ain't it? Now they're called the sons of God. But it doesn't sound like any of them are much any better than the ones that weren't. Can we gather that? Do you think the culture in which Enoch lived was an easy culture to walk with God 300 years? Do you think they could have a culture very much like today's culture? Did it hinder Enoch? Well, I guess maybe in some ways it may have, but it's not recorded. It just recorded that he walked 300 years with God in the midst of this. As did Noah. Now, what does it say about Noah? It says, and it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created, from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. God is angry. When God is angry, things do not go well for you. Always remember that. But verse 8, it says, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Is that a blessing to you? Does that sound good to you? Now, my next question, though, is do you think that Enoch, found grace in the eyes of the Lord? That's the only way Enoch could have lived and walked with God 300 years if he had found grace in the eyes of God. It starts with grace, my friends. Enoch did not earn it. Enoch did not earn a home in heaven. It was paid for by the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, I want to throw another thought. How did Enoch go to heaven? Christ had not come yet. The covenant agreement of God. The covenant that he said that I will save my people from their sins. That was planned before the foundation of the world, as was the rest of it. That if God said he's going to do something, will he do it? Do you think that the one that was described in Isaiah 53 came right on time, hundreds of years later, to lay his life down for you? So as sure as that happens, I believe that there's going to be a day when he comes back for us. For our body, the redeemed people of God are going to go where he is with their body. We'll meet him in the air if we're already alive. We're still alive when he comes. Otherwise, he's going to resurrect them all. And we're going to go where he's at. Our spirit will already be there. But he's going to come back and get the body. Heard a sermon talked about Elder John, I don't know if he was an elder, John Wycliffe. When he taught these things, he was persecuted and they destroyed his body. I believe God can put that body back together. As he will do Polycarp, who was burned at the stake, and other martyrs that were killed in so many different ways. God's going to put those bodies back together too. He's going to put together the bodies of his people that are cremated. You know some things about that. He's going to put them back together because he said that I will raise them incorruptible. Their mortal shall put on immortality, their corruptible must put on incorruption. It's got to happen because God purposed it. And that's why Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and that's why Enoch did too. The covenant of grace will not fail. That's the good news. And if you believe that, you ought to walk with God to the best of your ability for 300 years. Or however many years you've got. Because by the time of David, it was 70, and by strength, 80, and that's about average. Is God's hand shortened and it cannot do that? God can bring his dear children along, can he? Help them along the way. Because I want to ask you one other question. Do you think God had to help Enoch with that walk at times? Do you ever think that Enoch might have seen everything around him and got discouraged? It's not recorded. But have you ever tried to walk with God and get discouraged? You ever get scared like John Mark? Scared like Peter was when he denied the Lord 3 times they even knew who he was. Have you ever had built up in your mind that you didn't like the people you were sent to talk to, like Jonah did? I mean, we can fill in these blanks all night. What is the difference? God's grace. And if God's grace is with us and we have the faith that He gives in the new birth, we can walk with God to the best of our ability for the days of our life. Now, there's still things we must do. I mean, Enoch had to do something because Enoch had to eat, right? A man that does not work should not eat. So I'm sure Enoch did something to eat. But the focal point of Enoch's life that's recorded in Scripture for us to have a record for him was that he walked with God 300 years. And that ought to be an example to us. It may have been very well an example to Noah. If that's true, let's ask the Lord to help us on that journey. May the Lord bless you and keep you, is our prayer.